Hey guys, welcome back. So today, this video is about an update to the progress of the Hill & Mac Gunworks StG44, which I have sitting here in front of me, and standing to my left is Mac himself. Now, I'm a fake Mac. Mine is an acronym of Military Arms Channel, but he is a real Mac. And thanks for coming out.
Absolutely.
And giving us an update to what's going on with this StG44. Now, I know a lot of you guys have a lot of questions. I've been kind of keeping my finger on the pulse of the community and also on the status of the development of the StG44. And a lot of you guys have, been critical, and perhaps rightly so to a degree. Everybody misses launch dates, it seems, but the gun's a little bit behind schedule. But what I wanted to do is invite Mac up, bring a current generation rifle, and discuss where they are in terms of development and production schedules, and basically just bring you guys up to speed as to where things are at, because I know I've seen people saying it's vaporware, that it's never going to happen, you're out of business, all sorts of things, and we just want to address that in this video. So, Mac, if you could explain to the audience, where are we currently with the development of the StG44?
Today, January 7th, 2017. Yeah,
17.
yeah. Writing my checks wrongly. We are what is referred to as zeroth production. So the rifles you see before you are off of production tooling. Everything is production parts. We pulled these out of bins of finished parts, assembled the rifles, fired the rifles, and we're here.
Okay. Now, I do follow you on Instagram. So if you guys don't already follow, it's HMG Gunworks. HMG Gunworks on Instagram. Follow them because they do post pictures and videos as they're working through the processes. I've seen boxes of parts. I've seen some test fire videos. And that's how I've been kind of staying in touch, also with the occasional email, text message. So the rifle continues its development. Are you still continuing to launch, or continue with the plans to launch this with multi-caliber?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This product specifically, there's no way we could have developed one gun and then done other calibers later. You kind of have to develop 4 firearms all at the same time.
Okay.
Because you have to make accommodations for different bolt sizes and different gas piston sizes. Where we are right now, kind of with the whole product, is we are fine-tuning our gas port sizes and spring pressures for the different calibers.
Okay. So what we're looking at then, this is a production receiver, this is a production trigger housing,
Yes.
These are production stocks,
Yes.
handguards, gas tubes, everything is production.
All 218 parts on this rifle are production
218 parts. Good grief. All right. Well, that makes sense. So I hate asking, but the audience is going to ask, what are we looking at in terms of timeline? We've missed some dates already.
Yes. Yes, we have.
Would it be fair to say, let me make up a date and you say yes, maybe, mid-2017, worst case scenario?
Yes, maybe.
Yes, maybe. So guys, I mean, that's about as, let's back up a minute. I've learned a lot over the last few conversations we've had over lunch and dinner regarding the development of this rifle. What I've learned in our conversations is that even though you have the original blueprints to the original StG44, those blueprints don't include critical information such as tolerances.
No.
And if you guys know anything about manufacturing, without those tolerance specs, you can't build from blueprints.
Well, it's not just tolerance specs. There were lacking heat treatment specs and material notes from the Third Reich that don't exist anymore because they don't make sense. And even something as simple as material choices is so critical to this firearm. It's crazy.
Yeah. And so what I've learned, not only are they working from old blueprints that are perhaps incomplete and lacking information, certainly not enough to build from, but you've also made changes to the gun that are different than what the Germans had originally done back in the 40s. So you have a different magazine well.
Yes.
You're using an HK style trigger pack. You've obviously done different things with the barrel to accommodate multi-calibers, different things with the trunnion, different things with the bolt itself and the carrier.
Yes.
And we have some examples here in front of us of original designs versus your design. So in essence, what I gleaned from our conversations is that you've made a brand new rifle that looks just like a historic piece.
Well, 4.
4 brand new rifles that looks like a historic piece. So, and I'm going to guess, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking at about 85%, 90% original, but there's some differences.
Absolutely. So a lot of the cosmetic parts and some not so cosmetic parts are very interchangeable with originals. If you have original parts, your buttstock, your grip panels, your safety selectors, charging handles, if you have rear sights, front sights, stacking swivels, gas tubes, you can even make front handguards fit if you want to. we try to make it as original externally and functionally as possible, but allowing us to manufacture it well, because the original guns, they'd have a table of probably, I don't know, 30 or 40 gunsmiths hand fitting each part and serializing each part to each gun.
Right.
You can't take the bolt out of one and put it in the other. We have to be able to do that.
Okay.
So we had to make some changes, basic fundamental changes to how the gun, not how the gun works, but how it's manufactured, so that we can have interchangeability, because we want the end customer to slide his barrel on his new conversion bolt and go shoot a different caliber.
And that means you've built a new gun.
Yeah, pretty much.
So if you take a look at this gun, it's feeding from PMags,
Yes.
and it's firing 5.56, a caliber that didn't exist when it was originally designed.
That
So you
is-
have different geometries you're working with.
Not only geometry, you've got about twice the chamber pressure to make it operate with. And the gun, as we had it, the original design, we put some 5.56 through it, it killed itself.
Yeah.
Because the math said it should have worked, but it didn't. And then we had to figure out why.
A lot of things have changed over the years in terms of metallurgy and manufacturing processes. So in short, guys, it looks like you're going through the struggles of building basically a brand new rifle, and it's not like you're a massive corporation like a Magpul that can pull all these resources.
No.
You have a handful of folks, and really you're the brains behind the design and how to make all the parts work together. And then you have some talented folks that can go and then produce it from the machines and assemble and all that other stuff. But it's still a relatively small operation compared to a major manufacturer.
No, we don't have near the resources of any of the name brands that you would recognize. We don't have those kind of resources in terms of manpower, material, buying power. I go to a supplier and I go, hey, I need this. And they go, cool, how much you want? And I go, a couple 100,000 pounds. And they go, yeah, we don't care unless you're buying tons at a time.
Right.
So it's a struggle.
Now, here's a question. I mean, people are going to have this question. Is HMG viable and healthy? Is the company doing
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
So I know people are concerned that perhaps you've run out of money, whatever, and that's the reason the project has been delayed. It's simply you're struggling with figuring out the final nuances. You have production tooling for the receivers,
Yes.
the barrels, the gas tubes, the bolts, the carriers, the trigger packs. You've sorted all that out, the stocks, and now you're down to just making the fine tuning so that it works with different types of ammunition and stuff. Is that a fair
Absolutely.
statement?
That is a
I don't want to put
complete
words in your mouth. It's just
No.
based upon our conversation.
That's completely fair.
So,
Things like you got the gun shooting and then you try to suppress it because we know people are going to do that, and you don't want something really adverse to happen while you do that. So
Yeah.
you do testing with that.
because I'm going to put a suppressor on it.
I did.
Because I want to take it out and do some varmint hunting or something with it, maybe even deer hunting. Okay, well, given everything that you know, let's just for the sake of brevity, let's talk about two of the challenges you faced. The audience kind of gets an idea outside of the multi-caliber thing. A couple of things that I picked up on with our discussions that I found particularly interesting was how the bolt and carrier interface with the round, and also some of the challenges you faced with the trigger pack itself and going from a semi-automatic or going from a fully automatic trigger pack to a semi-automatic trigger pack. With regards to the bolt, now guys, what we have in front of us here, and I also want to go over this very quickly, we have a mix of original parts and new parts.
Mm-hmm.
So a bolt, before we get into that discussion, here is an original bolt.
That's a carrier, and here's
I'm sorry, a carrier, and this is another original carrier. And notice the differences. Now, guys, when they were producing these things in the 1940s, they were a work in progress right up until they were putting them in the field. And so what I have on the top is actually from an open bolt design, and on the bottom is a closed bolt design, which is the most common that you'll
Yes.
find in the field. And if you take a look at your design, it is a mix of the two. So you borrowed heavily from the open bolt design.
Yes, we did. We did that for a couple of reasons. One, it allowed us to rotate our gas piston so we could do a bolt hold open, because the original did not have that. The MP44, StG44 did not have a bolt hold open. We thought if we could do that, one, it allows us to do different length gas systems so that we can do SBR versions, we can do DMR versions, we can do other calibers that may be bigger in the same receiver, and it allows us to do things like you have the same gas or the same bolt carrier, so you don't have to re-headspace it. You have the same striker, the same da-da-da-da-da. It also allows to do the bolt hold open a la the HK style slap, hold it open and then slap to reload it.
Okay.
We thought that added something to the firearm. It also kind of helped one of those steps of you can't just go buy an original MP44 bolt carrier and bolt and trigger housing,
And make
slide
a
them
machine
in
gun.
and make a machine gun.
Because that makes the ATF very unhappy.
Yes, it is.
So let's talk about that bolt. You have an example here, I believe, of an original.
Yes, that is
And then-
this is a very late production bolt. There are very
set like this, or actually like this.
There are a lot of little cuts in here that say that this is an extremely late production bolt. A lot of little nuances. Ours is slightly different.
And this is the new production bolt.
Yes.
We'll show that up close, but
One of the bigger differences is specifically back here on the unlocking ears. The Germans basically had some material choices that were not exactly the best that they could have picked from, but it's what they had. So they had some strengthening features in here that we just frankly don't need
okay.
because we can choose better materials.
So it looks very similar, but
This
there's
bolt-
also noticeable differences.
Now these bolts will slide into our receivers and function.
No kidding. Well, that's an interesting thing to know. Because looking at it, I would think that there'd be enough differences where it wouldn't, but that's cool that it does.
Your headspace is slightly different because the German ones weren't all made to the same tolerances that ours are. We hold about a 2/10 of a thou overall length, and that's kind of one of the critical. There are about 8 critical dimensions on this firearm, and you have to give everything else room to play.
Right.
Because if you try to control and constrain this firearm, it seizes.
So that's one of the things I learned in our conversations is that, first of all, you have a bolt, so the locking surface is back here on the back of the bolt, and so when it's in lockup, it's setting in an, I'm exaggerating, but a position like this. And then when it goes to fire, the little hook comes back, lifts it up out of its locking recess, and pulls it rearward. Now, it's very similar to other firearms, such as the FAL and the SKS, but this is a first-generation gun conceptually. What the Germans were working on had never been done before in this fashion. So the FAL and the SKS are based on the work that the Germans had done on this gun, I would assume.
Yes.
And so the FAL and the SKS do things slightly differently. In the case of this gun, when it comes out of the battery and unlocks, this is just free to kind of float around the receiver.
And it has to. Because if you try to constrain it, it won't even come out of the trunnion.
That's
Which is
interesting.
kind of one of the first things, our first generations, you design it in CAD and it's perfect, and you go and it seizes, and you go, why the heck is it seizing?
Right.
And it's one of those, you have to give that bolt a lot of leeway to move around, because
I found it interesting.
if your trunnion is not perfect to your receiver, it's not perfect to, there's a speck of dirt in it, it'll seize.
Right.
So you have to give it room to play, basically.
Another thing I can see that the bolt face is cut at a slight angle. So if the bolt's perfectly vertical, there's differences there. So this is one of the conversations we had that I found to be particularly interesting, is that how this thing controls the case during the cycling is really unique, because you have the bolt face and the extractor face changing
They change angularity to
direction,
each other.
and then you have the free play of the bolt going on at the same time. So really, you have a complete hot mess.
It is
It's kind of a
described as a
Heisenberg
mess.
theory of like unpredictability
But
that
you
you have to predict and account for.
So what you have to do is you have to set benchmarks for the extractor, so that we kind of view it as 3 phases of extraction. You have a primary phase of extraction, which is when the bolt goes from the lock position to the unlock position. The extractor twists the cartridge case. Then you have secondary extraction, which is when the gas piston pulls it violently to the rear. And then you have this third position where the extractor geometry, when this goes into the back side of the trunnion, it actually pulls the cartridge case in tight against it and acts as a pivot for the fixed extractor to then pivot the round out of the ejection port. Being a fixed extractor, you have to provide it a pivot point, otherwise you get a bizarre weak extractor ejection. You'll get it actually, it'll knock the case out back into the chamber. We have some pretty interesting footage where we figured that out. The cartridge case actually did like 360s or 720s inside the trunnion and then went right back into the trunnion.
I'd love to see that. So that brings us to our second point. So we talked about, the first thing I found interesting is how the bolt interfaces with the cartridge and the breech face and all that stuff and the locking points. The second thing I found interesting in our discussions was that the original, of course, was a select fire weapon, and so it was a machine gun, which means it had extra parts in the trigger group. But what was interesting is that the extra parts interface with the bolt to make the thing work properly. So basically, there's 2 components, 2 pieces inside the trigger group of the full auto, the auto sear, and what was the other?
There's an in-battery safety.
In-battery safety and the auto sear.
And there's an auto trip inside that housing that not only act as auto sears and trips,
Right.
they keep the bolt in the travel position when it makes the handoff from the hammer that pushes up on the bottom of the
So it
bolt.
doesn't just try.
So it doesn't just tip before it goes into the trunnion. There's this intermediary position of hammer to auto sear and safety selector to inside the trunnion.
It's like handing it off from one to the other to guide the bolt into battery.
And we had to replicate that without an in-battery safety, because that's been outlawed before by the ATF. They
Right.
said that's too close to an auto trip, and then obviously we can't have an auto trip.
So to keep the ATF happy, you had to get creative with the engineering.
Yes.
So all these things combined, and this is a learning process. You didn't know this going into it.
No.
So it's a trial and error type of thing.
We didn't know any of this until we put one together and went, well, this doesn't work. Why doesn't it work?
Right. So that's kind of why we're at where we're at. But the good news is that it's still continuing development and we're almost there. But I find this conversation interesting, and in front of us, again, we have more examples of original parts versus new parts. So let's take a look at an original trigger group.
It's a nightmare. And
Yeah,
you
it's
can see your autos.
crazy.
This is your auto trip, and this is your in-battery safety.
So I'll show a close-up of this, but they're the two parts that we're talking about that kind of help guide the bolt in its travels. And then here is a new production lower.
Now, the dimensions between holes on centers is identical, and the housings, they're actually interchangeable. So if you have an original housing and you can get the guts out of it, you can put an HK pack in here and you can use an original housing.
That's pretty cool.
Now you have to grind the rivets out and
Right. Well, another thing that's
Vermont
interesting to note is that this, because it's a select fire, your selector is right here.
your safety and your selector are separate controls on this firearm.
Right.
On the original.
So that's interesting to note. So you can see some of the similarities and differences. I mean, this thing externally looks, for reenactors and stuff, this looks the part. But there are some slight nuanced differences. But what I thought was really cool is that the stocks that you've developed are pretty much
Now,
identical.
the
in
original
contour.
stocks will go into our butt caps. And you can put an original stock on our butt cap if you want to.
So if you guys can find a little parts kit, you can
There's
replace
some
it with an
reproductions
original.
out there still that you can find.
That's very cool. So that was interesting. We talked about the bolt and carriers. Here's the original handguard, and here's a new production handguard. You know,
Obviously, our stampings are a little more clear, more defined. There's
Right.
kind of, this is a particularly difficult part to make from a flat sheet of sheet steel. Theirs was kind of soft. All of their hits are kind of soft because you get a lot of tearing in this. We had a heck of a time trying to get this not to,
tear, because you do some pretty sharp folds.
yes.
That's pretty interesting.
We have to make that transition from the trunnion profile and smoothly transition to a handguard profile and then up here to the gas block area. So there's kind of, just this part has 3 transition zones that we had to stamp in.
Another interesting thing, boy, this thing's looks like it has blood on it. It's
It's-
really pitted. This is an original trunnion, I guess we can call it, and this is a new manufactured piece. So
A
this
lot of
is-
parts are interchangeable. Our bolts will slide into an original trunnion in function. You can actually use our bolt blocks, which is what the rear of the bolt rests against. You can actually use, there you go. You can
this
use
thing's so pitted though, it's like
It's-
really rusty. I don't want to force it.
Our bolt blocks will go into original guns. If you need to rehead space your STG or you have a parts kit or something, you can buy our bolt blocks and slide it into your gun.
So you can actually get an old gun up and running again. That's pretty cool. So again, it's pretty close. It's like we're 85–90% of the original. It's a learning process for me too.
Well, not to
And here's an original 8mm Kurtz magazine, all steel. Here's one of your polymer prototypes, and this is a 5.56
or 300 blackout. Yeah.
or 300 blackout. So you can see what they've done, or it'll use just a standard AR-15 magazine. So there's some similarities yet dissimilarities. You have the over insertion stop, but then you have the magazine lock for the AR-15.
So what we
But-
wanted to do was, we wanted the overall length of the magazine that hangs outside of the firearm below the mag well to be consistent with the original.
To give it that authentic
So it
look.
looks a little larger, but that's because this section is actually larger inside of this firearm than this was inside of the other.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Hopefully it makes sense to you guys too. I know you can't stand here and handle the parts like I am, but, and then one last thing that we haven't touched upon is just the gas tube. So the original is, let me guess,
This
this
is-
one right here is the original.
It's good that you have to guess.
I have to look because they're so similar.
So the originals were a stamping mechanism that if you've looked at an AK gas tube, that should look pretty familiar to you.
Yeah.
What we do is we actually have it as a tube and we do the cuts on the outside to mimic it, make it look exact. But this allows our gas system to be much more controlled. Our gas piston isn't beating itself up and down as it goes up and down this tube, and these do tend to wear out sometimes.
Gotcha. Sorry about the noise in the background, guys. New studios, new facilities. We're the new building here at Copper Custom. There's a lot of construction going on in the background still. So we're getting close, I guess, is the final summation.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm looking forward to the day that I get a phone call saying we have a production rifle for you to take a look at. We're not there yet. The gun still needs some tweaks and tunes. I mean, it'll fire multiple rounds, but you're still having issues with the gas port size versus the spring rates. And once you get that solved, then we're at a production gun, you think?
We haven't broken anything substantial past that. So I have.
Oh, I can break it.
Oh, I believe
If you,
that. Having seen you in action, I can believe that.
if I touch it, I can break it. So if you want destructive testing, send one my way. I'll destructively test it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But no, that's really good to hear. I know, again, a lot of folks are really anxious to see this gun come to market.
We know that there's a lot of interest in the firearm, more than we ever anticipated. That's also part of why we had a delay, because when you have to figure out, well, how do we make 500 rifles a year, which is what we originally intended, now we're talking 10 and 15,000 a year. We had to redesign the whole firearm.
Right.
So we had a design that wasn't 100%, and then we have to scrap that completely and start over.
Now with all the retooling and the parts that you had to scrap because they didn't work, all the stuff that goes into making a gun, getting it to where it is currently, the next question is, has this changed your anticipated market price?
No.
And so we're looking at what, $1,800?
$1,799 is still the MSRP today.
Okay, so you're still looking at about $1,800, $1,799 for the rifle. I was getting concerned that given the delays, and I know some of the production things that you ran into, some of the problems, my concern was the price was going to go sky high.
Well,
so you've kept the price the same.
I'd love to charge you $8,000 a rifle because I can make a tremendous profit on that.
But you'll sell 5.
But I'll sell 5.
Right.
And that's really not what our purpose of this rifle was, to give a semi-automatic version that has ammo that you can purchase off the shelf and you can go shoot.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm excited. If you guys have followed the channel for a while, if you remember me back in the early days, the channel name was and still is, it's in the URL, Sturmgewehr. This is the rifle of my dreams, and the reason I have stayed so close to the development of this rifle is because if I could pick one gun I could own in history, you're looking at it. Because in my mind, this is the granddaddy of all things modern.
I agree with that 100%.
So-
Having been in the guts of this gun and been in the weeds with it for a while, yeah.
And what also I found in our discussions, what the German engineers had to go through to bring this thing to fruition and get it into the field is staggering given the technology gap.
Oh,
The fact that you have guys with slide rules and pencils and papers and, the drafting tables versus SolidWorks and being able to do analysis and stress analysis of parts before you even make your first actual part.
yes.
They didn't have the benefit of all that.
No.
They just had huge teams. They would just throw money and people at it. And here you have.
There's something to be said for huge teams of people and money.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a lot of either one of those. It's me. Basically, I drew every part of this gun.
That's amazing. Well, again, I look forward to seeing this thing come to market, and I wish you the best of luck, because my own selfish purposes, I want to hang one on the wall, and I kind of joke around saying I'm going to do the Osama bin Laden thing in every video. When I finally get one, I'm going to have it in every video. It's just leaning up against the wall while I'm talking. I'm really excited to see the thing happen. If you guys have any questions about anything in this video, of course, you can ask those questions down below. Now, I can only answer some of the questions. If you would be so kind to kind of follow the questions for the first couple of days as well, Mac will attempt to answer the questions you guys may have. I do ask that you guys keep the flaming down. They're working diligently to bring this thing to market. It requires patience. I'm trying to be patient. I get stressed out and I'll send them text messages at times like, where are we at? But it is coming, and hopefully we'll see this thing, early part of 2017.
Our philosophy now around the shop is, we know that we can win you back when we give you a fantastic product that you'll love shooting, that you enjoy shooting. If I rushed out, the 4th or 5th generation prototypes, which we could have done and met one of the deadlines, we'd have gotten them out, and we'd have gotten 5,000 of them out, and we'd have been out of business.
499 of them back.
Yes.
The people that actually shot them.
Yes.
So that I would wait another, I don't want to tell you that because you'll do it. I would wait another year or two for a perfectly functioning rifle. I don't want one that kind of sort of works. I have to clear malfunctions from.
That's been
I
done with
want
this
one that
rifle
works.
before. Well, there have been the kind of sort of works with this gun before.
Yeah, I know
and we don't
all
want that
about them.
again.
Yeah,
We don't want
they
that
were a
again.
mess. People don't even want to shoot them. They're highly collectible. You don't want to shoot them because they're notorious for breaking parts not working right.
I want you
So-
to go shoot it and enjoy it.
So that's what I'm looking forward to. So again, if you guys have any questions, we'll stick around for the first couple of days to answer those questions down below. Also, if you would like to support the Military Arms channel, you can do so by swinging by and checking out Copper Custom. And if you haven't already, please check out full30.com. That's full30.com. We've taken all the web's best firearms content creators and brought them under one roof, and that is full30.com. Thanks for watching, everybody. Mac, thank you for coming out,
Absolutely.
and we'll talk to you guys soon.